All right, so you're ready to dive into something kind of deep today.
Always up for a good deep dive.
Yeah, so this is something, we've all thought about, right?
Yeah.
Like, what is it that really makes people successful?
That age-old question, yeah. Is it all about talent? Or is there something else going on?
Exactly. And, there's this book, Grit, by Angela Duckworth,
Oh, yeah, I love her work.
and it's all about this idea of passion and perseverance and how those things actually play a bigger role than we might think.
And what I find so interesting about Duckworth is she doesn't just talk theory, she actually brings in her own story,
Oh, right.
which kind of throws a wrench in the whole you're born with it idea.
Well, yeah, because, her dad straight up told her she wasn't a genius multiple times.
And then, boom, MacArthur, genius, Grant later on. How about that?
It's like, what? That's crazy. You can't make this stuff up.
Seriously, you can. And it makes you wonder, what was it that got her there if it wasn't pure talent?
Okay, yeah, that's the big question, isn't it?
Yeah.
What makes someone like her succeed when others who might even be more naturally gifted just, I don't know, they don't reach that level?
It's that thing, right? We admire hard work. We all say we value it. But then we're all obsessed with those people who just, make it look easy.
Right. The naturals, the prodigies, the ones who seem to just have it.
I can't even imagine the 5-year-old playing a concerto or the athlete who's just always been dominant. How is that even possible?
Totally. But see, that's what Duckworth is getting at, I think. We're so focused on the naturals that we kind of miss how important plain old hard work really is.
And she uses this example, right? The student she had, David Loom.
I remember that story.
And he was, super hardworking. But he struggled with calculus at first.
Makes sense. Calculus isn't exactly a walk in the park.
Yeah, and it's easy to just assume, oh, he's just not a math person.
Right. The kind of fixed mindset trap we can fall into.
But David, he didn't give up. He just kept at it.
Yeah.
And by the end of the year, crushing it, wasn't he?
Acing the class. Even got a perfect 5 on the AP exam.
Talk about proving those assumptions wrong. Shows you what persistence can do, even when it looks like you're not naturally good at something.
Okay, but this isn't just about students, though, right? Duckworth, she even talks about her own experience working at McKinsey.
McKinsey. Oh, wow. That's like the big leagues of consulting.
Exactly. And here she is, advising these huge companies. And in her head, she's thinking, do I even know enough to be here?
Almost like imposter syndrome, but at the highest level.
Seriously. It's like, even in these fields where, everyone's supposed to be super smart, just being smart isn't enough. There's got to be something more.
And that something more is what she really digs into.
Which leads to this equation, right? Talent times effort equals skill. Skill times effort equals achievement.
Effort counts twice. I love that. It really flips the script on how we think about success.
Yeah, it's not just about what you're born with. It's about what you do with it. You could have all the potential in the world, but if you don't, put in the work.
You're just coasting, not really getting anywhere.
But okay, so it's effort. But is it just any kind of effort? Or is there, a specific way to do this whole effort thing right?
That's where things get really interesting, and that's where Duckworth brings in this idea of grit.
Okay, let's talk about grit. What is it, really?
Duckworth says it's like this mix of passion and perseverance.
Okay, so not just working hard when it's fun. It's about sticking with it when things get tough.
Exactly. It's like you've got this goal, and you're not giving up even when you hit obstacles, even when you feel like quitting.
Even when everyone else is telling you to maybe try something else.
Yeah, it's that inner drive, that fire that keeps you going.
Okay, I like that.
And she uses this example of West Point.
West Point, the military academy.
Done and only.
Okay.
So they have this thing called the whole candidate score.
Okay, so they're not just looking at grades.
Nope. They're trying to get the whole picture. Academics, leadership potential, physical fitness, all of it.
So it's like, are you a good fit for the whole West Point experience?
Right. But here's the thing. They found that the biggest predictor of who actually succeeds, who makes it through all the crazy training, is grit.
So it's not the ones with the highest scores, it's the ones with the most grit. It's wild.
It really is. It's like sometimes it's not about being the smartest or the strongest, but about having that tenacity to just keep going.
And she talks to this guy, Mike Matthews, who was a military psychologist, and he went through West Point training himself, right?
Yeah, and he says the same thing. It's that never give up attitude that really matters.
Okay, so grit, it's like this superpower almost.
It kind of is. And you know what's cool? This isn't just some new idea. Duckworth actually ties it back to, get this, Charles Darwin.
Darwin, the evolution guy. I wouldn't have pictured him as a grit kind of guy.
Right. You think genius, you don't always think hard worker.
Yeah.
But Darwin, he wasn't actually considered this super brilliant mind.
So he wasn't like solving equations in his head as a kid or something?
Not quite. He even described his own memory as so poor in his autobiography.
Wow, really?
Yeah, but when you read about him, he was this super dedicated, methodical plotter. Like, he'd observe something, experiment, refine his ideas. It was years and years of this slow and steady effort.
And that's how he came up with like the theory of evolution.
Exactly. It challenges that whole image of the genius who just knows, doesn't it?
It really does. So maybe true brilliance is more about that persistence, that willingness to keep working at it, even when it's hard.
It makes you think, right? Maybe it's not about having all the answers right away, but about having the grit to keep searching.
Okay, so we've got talent, we've got effort, we've got grit. But there's another piece here, right? This whole follow your passion thing we always hear about.
Ah, yes. The great passion debate.
Because is it really that simple? Just find your passion and everything falls into place. I'm not so sure about that.
Yeah, it sounds good, but is it realistic? Duckworth actually digs into this too.
What does she say? Because honestly, sometimes I don't even know my passion is, let alone how to follow it.
Right? Like, where's the instruction manual for that?
Yeah.
So what Duckworth finds is that passion might not be this, like, sudden revelation.
Not a lightning bolt moment.
Nope. It's more of a process, she says. You discover it and refine it over time.
So it's more about like exploring and experimenting to figure out what really clicks for you.
That's the idea. You don't just sit around waiting for passion to hit you. You got to go out and try things.
Makes sense.
And she mentions this story about a Reddit user who was feeling lost career-wise because they were interested in, like, everything.
Oh, I feel that. Having a million interests, but not knowing which one to like actually pursue.
And Duckworth's advice was basically, go explore. You won't find your passion by just thinking about it.
You got to get your hands dirty, right?
Exactly. Now, of course, she's realistic. You can't turn every little interest into a job. But the point is, if you start with something you genuinely enjoy...
You're way more likely to stick with it, to put in the work.
Exactly. And that's where the grit comes in, right? It's
Yeah.
easier to be gritty when you're actually passionate about what you're doing.
Because success takes dedication no matter what you're doing. And if you're not into it, it's going to be so much harder to keep going.
Couldn't agree more. And this all connects to another big piece of Duckworth's work, the concept of deliberate practice.
Deliberate practice. Okay,
Yeah.
Tell me more about that, because that sounds like something we can actually DO, not just talk about.
It's like moving beyond just doing something a lot. It's about being focused, putting in the effort, and always looking for ways to refine what you're doing.
So it's not about like mindlessly practicing for hours and hours.
Not at all. It's got to be intentional, like really thinking about how you're practicing and why.
Okay, I'm getting that. So Duckworth, she actually talks about this in relation to jogging.
Jogging. Yep, she'd been running for ages, like thousands of hours.
Wow, that's a lot of jogging.
Right. But she wasn't getting any faster. And the reason was it wasn't deliberate practice.
So she was putting in the time, but not in the right way.
Exactly. And then she talks to this researcher, Anders Ericsson, who's like the expert on deliberate practice.
Okay, so what did he say?
Well, he said it's not about how MUCH you practice, but how you practice. That's the key difference.
So you could be spending hours on something.
Yeah.
But if you're not doing it right, you're not going to see the same results.
And Ericsson actually breaks down deliberate practice into 4 main elements.
Okay, hit me with those.
Right. So first, you've got to set stretch goals. So pushing yourself beyond what's comfortable.
Got it. Keep challenging yourself.
Number 2, full concentration. You can't be half-assing it. Got to be fully present.
I feel that. Easy to get distracted these days.
Oh, tell me about it. Then, number 3, immediate feedback. You need to know what's working and what's not.
So you can adjust course, yeah.
Exactly. And finally, repetition with refinement. So doing it over and over, but each time trying to get a little bit better.
So it's like this constant cycle of try, get feedback, improve, repeat.
That's it. And the cool thing is they've done studies with middle schoolers showing that even just teaching them about deliberate practice can lead to real improvement.
Really? So it's not just for like elite athletes or musicians.
Anyone can benefit from this.
I love that. It's like you don't have to be born with some special talent. You can learn to practice in a way that actually gets you results.
It levels the playing field for sure.
Okay, this is all making sense. But I got to ask, this whole deliberate practice thing, can it coexist with being in like a flow state? You know, that feeling of being totally in the zone.
That's an interesting question because On the surface, they do seem kind of at odds, right?
Right. Deliberate practice is all about effort, pushing yourself.
Mm.
Flow is more like effortless, right?
Exactly. So can you have both? Well, the research actually suggests it's not so black and white.
Oh, so maybe there's a way to make them work together.
Some experts talk about the feeling of deep satisfaction you get when you push through those tough parts during deliberate practice.
Kind of like, yeah, I did that. I stuck with it.
Exactly. And then there's that other side, the blissful absorption of flow, where it feels effortless.
So maybe it's like a dance between the two.
Maybe. You push yourself, you find that flow, you push yourself again. That back and forth could be part of what makes mastery so rewarding.
That makes sense. It's not always going to be easy, but it's not about forcing it either.
Right. It's finding that balance between pushing and letting go.
Okay, so we've got talent, we've got effort, we've got grit, and now we've got deliberate practice. But I feel like there's this other big piece we haven't really touched on, and that's purpose. Like, why are we doing all of this in the first place?
The big why, yeah. That's huge. And you're right, Duckworth brings that in too.
Because if it's just about achieving stuff for the sake of achieving stuff, that doesn't seem very fulfilling, does it?
Not really. It's got to be connected to something bigger, something that matters.
So how does Duckworth talk about purpose?
Well, she says it's about feeling like your work is meaningful, that it has an impact beyond just yourself.
Like you're contributing to something bigger than just your own little world.
Exactly. And that purpose can really fuel your grit, you know? When things get tough, it's that sense of purpose that can keep you going.
It's like, okay, this is hard, but it's worth it because...
Exactly. It gives you that extra push, that reminder of why you're doing what you're doing.
Okay, that makes sense. So does she give any examples of this whole purpose thing in action?
Oh, she does. Remember Alex Scott?
Refresh my memory.
So she was this little girl who started a lemonade stand to raise money for childhood cancer research.
Oh yeah, I remember that story. Such a powerful example.
Right. Duckworth calls that pro-social purpose, using your efforts to make a positive impact on the world.
And it doesn't have to be something huge, right?
Not at all. It could be making a difference in your community, for your family, even for just one person. It's about that intention to contribute.
I like that. So what about people whose purpose, changes over time? Does she talk about that?
She does. She tells the story of Jane Golden, this artist who started out as a muralist.
Okay, and what happened?
Well, she ended up shifting to running this arts program where she found a new sense of purpose in helping her community.
So it's like your purpose can evolve as you do.
That's the beauty of it. And it's not static. It can change as you learn and grow.
And what I find really interesting is that Duckworth's research shows this connection between grit and purpose.
Oh, yeah. People who are high in grit tend to also have a strong sense of purpose.
So it's like they feed off each other.
It's this amazing synergy. And it reminds me of this idea from Aristotle, who talked about two kinds of happiness.
Two kinds. I thought happiness was just, happiness.
More nuanced than that. Aristotle talked about eudaimonic happiness, which is about living a meaningful life, a life of purpose.
So it's not just about feeling good. It's about feeling good because you're doing good.
Exactly. And then there's hedonic happiness, which is more about pleasure and enjoyment.
Well, both are important, but they're different.
And finding that balance between the two, between purpose and pleasure, is what Duckworth suggests can really help us cultivate grit.
So it's not about denying yourself joy. It's about finding that sweet spot.
Exactly. And that brings us to this next question, right? How do we actually develop grit? If it's so important, how do we get more of it?
Yeah, because it's one thing to understand it, but it's another thing to actually, put it into practice. So where do we even start?
Duckworth talks a lot about the growth mindset, this idea from Carol Dweck's work.
Oh, yeah, the growth mindset. I've heard of that.
Basically, it's believing that you can actually get better at things through effort.
So not just relying on whatever talent you're born with.
Exactly. It's about embracing those challenges, seeing setbacks as opportunities to learn.
Because people who have that fixed mindset, they kind of give up more easily.
They do.
Yeah.
It's like they see a setback and think, well, guess I'm just not good at this.
Yeah, it's a reflection on them personally, not just bump in the road.
Right. But people with a growth mindset, they see a setback and it's like, okay, what can I learn from this? How can I improve?
They don't let it get them down.
And Duckworth, she interviewed Bill McNabb, the CEO of Vanguard, and he was all about this growth mindset stuff.
Interesting. What did he say?
He said the best leaders are always learning, always pushing themselves to be better, never getting complacent.
So it's like, even when you're at the top, you got to keep that growth mindset.
Totally. And Duckworth also tells the story about a student, Kayvon, who got into Wharton. Super smart guy.
Oh, Wharton. That's impressive.
Right. But he really struggled with the quantitative courses there.
I can relate to that.
It happens. Even the most capable people hit those roadblocks.
So what did he do?
He was determined. He had that growth mindset, and he believed that if he kept working at it, he could improve.
He didn't give up.
At the end of the semester, he emailed Duckworth and said, I have a lot to teach them.
Wow, that's powerful.
Even in his struggle, he saw an opportunity to contribute, to share what he had learned.
It's like that's the essence of a growth mindset right there. You don't let challenges define you. You use them as fuel to grow.
Couldn't have said it better myself. But, you know, it's not just about our individual mindset, is it?
Right, we don't exist in a vacuum.
The culture and environment around us play a huge role, too.
So how does Duckworth talk about that? Like, how do our surroundings influence our grit?
Well, she uses her own family as an example. They have this thing called the hard thing rule.
The hard thing rule.
Okay, what's that?
Basically, everyone in the family has to commit to one hard thing.
So something that requires, like, daily effort.
Yeah, deliberate practice. And it's not just the kids. She and her husband do it too.
I love that. Leading by example.
Right. It's about creating this culture where effort and perseverance are valued.
And it's not about forcing them to do something they hate. It's about finding something they're passionate about and then supporting them in putting in the work.
So for Duckworth, it's research and yoga. Her husband, real estate and running. Her daughter chose piano.
It's like finding that thing that sparks your interest and then going all in.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this ties into another idea she talks about. Extracurricular activities as playing fields of grit.
That's a cool way to put it. Because sometimes kids don't get that structure and feedback at home, but they can find it in those organized activities.
Makes sense.
Think about sports teams, music groups, debate clubs. They all have clear goals, regular practice, opportunities to improve.
And those coaches, they can be like mentors pushing you to be better.
Exactly. And it's not just about the skills you learn in those activities, it's about the grit you develop.
Right, like learning to deal with pressure, to bounce back from setbacks, to work hard towards a goal.
And all of that translates to success in other areas of life, too.
It's like those activities become training grounds for developing those essential character traits.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And, you know, even West Point, they've shifted their approach over the years.
Really? How so?
Well, they used to have more of an attrition model, like weeding out the weaker ones.
Survival of the fittest kind of thing.
Right. But now they've moved towards a more developmental model.
So they're focusing more on supporting cadets' growth.
Exactly. They recognize that grit isn't just something you have or don't have, it's something you can develop.
That's a huge shift in thinking.
It is. And it's really encouraging because it means that even if you don't feel particularly gritty right now, you can work on it.
There's hope for us all.
Absolutely. And there's this great example from Pete Carroll, the coach for the Seattle Seahawks.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of him. Big on positivity, right?
He focuses on building his players' confidence, encouraging them to embrace challenges.
So it's not about yelling at them when they mess up.
Not at all. He's all about creating this culture of grit through encouragement and support.
And they actually do these grit talks with the team, right?
They do. They talk about resilience, perseverance, bouncing back from setbacks.
And his players rave about how his leadership style has helped them develop that never give up attitude.
It shows you how powerful a positive and supportive culture can be.
It's like grit becomes contagious when you're surrounded by people who value it.
Exactly. But, you know, there's this misconception that being gritty means being miserable.
Right, like you have to be constantly grinding and pushing yourself to the point of burnout.
And Duckworth actually found the opposite to be true. Her research shows that grittier people tend to report higher levels of happiness and well-being.
Really? That's so interesting. So it's not a trade-off between grit and happiness.
Not at all. It's like they complement each other.
Maybe it's because achieving those tough goals gives you this sense of accomplishment, this feeling of purpose.
It could be. Or maybe it's the satisfaction of knowing you're living in alignment with your values, pursuing things that truly matter to you.
And Duckworth tells this really inspiring story about Ta-Nehisi Coates, the writer who won a MacArthur Genius Grant.
Oh, yeah. Love his work.
And he talks about how failure has been a constant companion in his journey.
It's like even someone we consider a genius has faced those setbacks and challenges.
It makes you feel a little bit better about your own struggles.
Right. It normalizes the whole experience of failure. And Coates, he embraces it. He sees it as part of the creative process.
He even said writing IS failure over and over again.
But he didn't let that stop him. He kept writing, he kept learning, he kept refining his craft, and through that persistence, he achieved incredible success.
It's a good reminder that success isn't a straight line. There are going to be bumps along the way.
And it's about having the grit to navigate those bumps, to learn from them, and to keep moving forward.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into grit, I think the big takeaway is that talent is important, but it's not the whole story.
Absolutely. Effort matters, passion matters, perseverance matters, purpose matters, and having a growth mindset is crucial.
It's about embracing the journey, the ups and downs, and knowing that you have the power to cultivate grit within yourself.
And to create a culture of grit around you. Surround yourself with people who support your goals, who challenge you to grow, who believe in you.
It's like building your own personal grit squad.
I love that. Your grit squad. And remember, grit is a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets.
So keep practicing, keep pushing yourself, keep learning, and never underestimate the power of passion and perseverance.
And never be afraid to ask for help, to seek out mentors, to learn from those who have walked the path before you.
We're all in this together, right?
Absolutely. We can support each other, learn from each other, and inspire each other to become our grittiest, most resilient selves.
So to everyone listening, go out there and embrace the challenge, find your purpose, and cultivate your grit. You got this.
Hey, if you made it to the end of the video, thanks so much for listening. If you want to get the book for yourself, use the link in the description. If you're looking to level up your income, schedule a one-on-one with me to see if what I do might be right for you. Remember, like if you like the content and share so we can all become more book buff and life smart.